Welcome to the KuppingerCole Analyst Chat. I'm your host. My name is Matthias. I'm an analyst and advisor at KuppingerCole Analysts. And my guest today is Paul Fischer. He's an analyst with KuppingerCole, working out of London. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Matthias. How are you?
I'm fine. Great to have you again, and I hope you're doing well as well.
I am. Thank you very much.
Great. Today, we want to talk about trends. We want to talk about an area where things are changing rapidly, and we are at the beginning of 2021. So we want to talk about the DevOps area. So some developments, some trends that we are seeing in the market. And of course, we want to have a look at it with a slight twist towards security and identity and access management. But first of all, what is one of the most important trends that you are seeing in the area of DevOps right now?
Well, a phrase that keeps coming up in my reading and my desk research, particularly in the last sort of 6 months or so. That doesn't mean that it's only happened in the last 6 months, but it's just when I've become aware of it. And that's probably because I've been working on PAM for DevOps. And that's a thing called infrastructure as a code, which in a way sounds a bit like what, I don't know if you remember, it was software-defined networking, which people spoke a lot about a few years ago. But what it seems to be is, instead of infrastructure being a load of tin and a load of networking and all strung together, we're now having infrastructure which is defined purely as code, which should, in theory, make it much easier to roll out, much easier to upgrade, and cheaper to run. And of course, the key to all that is, I imagine, it would run in the cloud. So DevOps people are, it seems, now being encouraged to create stuff for infrastructure as a code. In terms of what my questions are, obviously, what does that do, or what does that mean for the security of all this, and what steps are being taken to ensure that infrastructure as a code, as code, is as secure as it can be? And if you have any code lying around in the cloud, as we all know, that is vulnerable to attack and vulnerable to theft. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about infrastructure as a code this year, as we move into, hopefully, the post-COVID period, which is something we're all looking forward to it. So that's one thing that I think we should be hearing a lot more about, and it'll affect not just DevOps, but it will affect identity, and it will affect privileged access management, and computing, or shall we say organizations in general. I think the attractions of infrastructure as a code is reduced cost, because you don't have to have so many people involved in creating infrastructure. It's also something that is scalable, much more scalable, because you're talking about code. That's something that can be scaled a lot more quickly than physical hardware, etc.
Right, and I think that if we just look at the two components of the term DevOps, and we look at infrastructure as code, so there are different tasks and different responsibilities when it comes to the developer. So they can create infrastructure on the go while they are working. So they can create different instances and maybe a testing environment on the go just by writing and executing code. And on the other hand, as you've mentioned, operations also can highly benefit from that, and it always gives the chance to provide infrastructure at the scalability as required, but also you can make sure that you freeze a well-known and known as secure definition of that infrastructure, and fall back on that and reuse it and scale it up. So this is really, if done right, and you've mentioned PAM for DevOps, I think that is really of importance. And it's important for the developers because they need to secure their technical accounts, their service accounts that are embedded in their infrastructure as code. And the same is true, of course, for the operations people who need to make sure that their access towards this infrastructure as code code in the cloud or wherever is properly secured. And I think that's identity, that's PAM.
I think also that the attraction of infrastructure as a code is, like you say, the speed and the fact that you can roll back to a previous version very easily, for example. But like anything in DevOps, and I think that's why the PAM vendors are taking it very seriously, is that you have to still ensure that while DevOps are allowed to do all these great and crazy things and create infrastructure like this and create other applications, that they are managed, and that the code and the secrets that they need to do all this stuff are protected. And that's where PAM and identity and access management come in. So, and I think infrastructure as code is of interest, particularly to perhaps manufacturing companies or automotive companies that are under pressure to develop new products like never before. You know, before you could launch a car and it would mostly be judged on its mechanical features, its mechanical performance. Now it's increasingly going to be judged on its software performance and how that software can squeeze better performance out of batteries and how it connects with other cars and how it connects with edge devices. So being able to create infrastructure for that sort of thing in this way is hugely important. But it has to be, like you say, it has to be secure.
Exactly, and then your last sentence, it has to be secure. We did some episodes around this area already. We talked with Alexei about the citizen developer who is working most probably also in the cloud, and of course also adding this sec to DevOps. Is this something that you see when you're doing your research in the market? So this DevSecOps, adding security to the DevOps tool chains, is this important?
I think that DevSecOps or SecDevOps is a bit of a misleading term, and I think it was probably invented by the market to sell security products. I don't think there is really anything called DevSecOps that works, or SecDevOps, whichever way. I can't even remember what I said now. DevOps, SecDevOps. I think that security purely must be built into DevOps operations, and the people responsible for doing that are not going to be the people that work in DevOps. They're going to be the managers around them. They're going to be the CISO, the people that need to take that holistic view of security for the entire organization. So I obviously think that security is going to become an integral part of software development, but it will be done through the decisions of CISOs and through the decisions of other IT people, who then make the choice of what technology to buy or what platforms to buy to enable secure DevOps. And then again, comes back to things like privileged access management. And increasingly, people are starting to talk about secrets management more than this is another thing that I predict will happen not overnight. I've noticed there's already within the sort of PAM community, if that's what you want to call it, we're shifting from we've gone from privileged account management to privileged access management, because it seems old-fashioned now to talk about privileged accounts, to secrets management. And I think that's an important change, because it's not so much people have privileged accounts or they have privileged access. They have access, or they need access to things that are secret, or that if they fell into the wrong hands could do harm to the organization. So I think we're seeing a shift now between, the old idea of privileged accounts were for admins to do privileged things, to users right across the spectrum, including people that are now used to working from home on the endpoints, etc. So we're going to see the shift towards managing secrets or managing privilege, so much more than having a privilege account. You may one day you may work in DevOps, and one day you need access to particular tools, or you need access to some code, or you need access to containers, whatever it is. The next day you may not. Therefore, you don't always be a privileged user. You just become someone who is a privileged, a consumer of secrets. And when you need those secrets, you need to go through zero trust. You need to be authenticated, and all of that has to happen really quick. That's the other thing that is a trend, is that the speed of computing, the speed of development, and the speed of the way things happen is increasing. Look, I mean, we all went on our Christmas break, our holiday break from KuppingerCole. We came back to find that Teams had been completely changed overnight. Well, not over Christmas. There's been yet another update to Office 365. So we're seeing it even in the stuff that we consume, and that's happening within organizations as well, where applications and code is being, it never ends. There's never a finished object.
Right, and if you think of where is DevOps in place? It's in place where you have this speed, where people have to provide solutions, new services, new apps, new infrastructure at a high pace, and it needs to be then, of course, done properly when it comes to the tool chain for creating the code, for writing the code, for testing the code, for doing code analysis, for deploying the code on different platforms. And all of this also, as you've mentioned, requires secrets to make sure that you have access to the platform you're deploying to, be it microservices run in containers, be it serverless, be it a traditional infrastructure as a service with keys to access the service to create the infrastructure. All this needs to be done at the right pace, at the right agility. On the other hand, make sure that this is really properly secured and well executed. If things go wrong, this is bad. If things go wrong at scale, this is really dangerous at scale, and this is really an issue there. And of course, all the information that is stored within the infrastructure as code, needs to be properly protected as well.
Yeah, and the way that we're moving into containerization and things being broken down, instead of monolithic applications now, little bits of code are separated into containers, which meets all those demands for agility and for flexibility. But it does present a problem, perhaps, of how to, you've got applications now broken up into all these millions of separated containers. How to protect all those is a challenge, I think. And there's something else that is kind of crazy sounding, but it's called chaos engineering, where developers deliberately experiment on software that's in production to see if to sort of stress test the systems to make sure that they may withstand unexpected conditions. That sounds like the worst thing possible you could do to a production system, to introduce some kind of chaos just to see if it works. But apparently that's becoming a practice of some sort. It sounds like, failing fast or break things. You have to break things to get to where you want to be or to make things better. It sounds like one of those nice theories, but I'm sure that in reality, it would drive most IT managers and CISOs and everybody else up the chain completely crazy. The idea that DevOps are deliberately introducing errors and things that might break just to see if it can withstand that. So
Yeah, being in a security advisor, being in the identity and access management field for so many years, that really sounds scary for me, although I get the point and I've come across this term chaos engineering quite frequently recently. But this is really something where you also, at least in my opinion, being no developer and being not an operations guy, but this is something where you should apply a risk-based approach, what to test in which manner. I think it can make perfect sense to do that, to really, as you said, stress test, to get really to the core of the system, to understand where optimization can take place and where you can increase security as well.
Yeah.
But as you said, it's really a challenging approach, and I would like to see that in real life for the first time.
I remember the financial sector in UK, at least a few years ago. For many years, the financial sector would never test on production systems for the very good reason that they're dealing with the economies or that we all depend on, and the banking system. However, they did eventually. People said at some point you need to test on production systems because you don't know everything. Just testing in theory doesn't give you a real idea of what might happen. But the difference was, they didn't just go ahead and then like do a bit of chaos engineering, as we were talking about just now. It was all done through risk management. It was all done through an agreed template of process and procedure that all banks signed up to, and only those banks that followed this procedure were allowed to test their own production systems. So you're absolutely right. We can't have people just going off throwing spanners literally into the works without it being, properly monitored and controlled. But I think chaos engineering has it's such an attractive title. I think people are going to be talking about it. It sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Right.
Like chaos engineering.
I think this is a concept that I've come across actually very earlier than that. I've talked to developers who provide large sales platforms in the cloud for goods, for retail goods, and they said, okay, we implement new functionality into that platform. We test it, of course, but then we don't roll it out to all the instances that we're running, but we're just rolling it out to say 10 to 15%. And depending on where the load balancer throws you at, you end up with the new or the old functionality so that they can test it in real life. And when it's working, they then deploy it to more so that it is gradually rolled out. So that is a concept that I've heard of before. It's not really breaking the system, but it's changing the functionality over time, and you won't know where you end up in the version 1.0 or the version 1.1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading this little blog here, and it's chaos engineering is mentioned again, and someone here says it's critical in today's hybrid infra world, as he calls it. But this sounds very much like a dev person talking, and his rationale is that unless you test things as the customer will experience them, then you haven't tested properly. But I don't know.
Right.
But I look forward to reading a lot more about that.
Absolutely. Before we close down, one final trend that you see in the DevOps environment when it comes to security, to identity, to privileged access?
The trend I think I mentioned just briefly was in that PAM, privileged access management, is really taking DevOps as their next sort of step forward. We've just, if I can just promote one of our reports, very shortly, hopefully by February, the Leadership Compass PAM for DevOps will be available for download on our website, which I produced. And even in the time that was produced, companies like CyberArk, for example, have even set up an entire division within the business to concentrate purely on PAM for DevOps with a dedicated general manager to lead that business. And there is sort of a battle going on now between the big four PAM providers. to gain leadership in this space. But they are being challenged by companies like SSH and HashiCorp, which use very lean vaultless or certificate-based systems that can be easily plugged into DevOps. So probably DevOps is featuring in other areas as well. But I just noticed even in the last year that I've been looking closely at this, that the focus has changed quite considerably. And I think, as I said, people are starting to talk about secrets management, not so much privilege access management. And I think the two are, I think DevOps is really pushing the innovation curve within privilege access management as a science, I suppose, is or a discipline is the best way. The other thing, of course, is cloud. I know that sounds crazy to say cloud is a trend. It seems obvious to say that after many years, but I think that the pandemic has pushed cloud even further into the up the sort of mind space of managers and buyers, and everything is developing cloud native applications seems to be, the way forward, a kind of a no-brainer decision, that we are moving even further into a cloud-based world.
Exactly. And I think one thing that we did not yet mention is the complete topic of serverless in the cloud, which is not a really new trend, but it's a trend that is gaining more and more traction. Of course, it is interesting for DevOps as well, because it's really with less administration effort and with less insecurity when it comes to how to pay for that. It's just pay per use, and that's it. I think that will be an aspect that we should look at as well. When you mentioned the PAM for DevOps document, I really highly recommend that as well. We've talked about that in an earlier episode already.
Yeah, we've mentioned it before, but it's imminent now. One other report that is actually available on our website is one I did on workplace delivery or workplace delivery systems, which is probably worth a whole podcast in itself. But right. There's another area where we're moving. The pandemic, has changed the way we work and whether people go back to their workplace or not. And I think people have realized how much time they spend looking for things, how much time they spend switching from applications to other applications. And although it's a sort of very immature field and dominated at the moment by the virtual like VMware and Citrix, I think that delivering single pane digital workplaces to users, whether they be at home, whether they be in an office space, is a growth area. And again, that will affect privilege access management and identity and access management and everything that we talk about.
Right. Okay. And I take this as a promise. We will have a talk about that as well, because
it's something I could waffle on about. So
yeah, great. Looking forward to that. Thank you very much for sharing your insight when it comes to trends and developments in the area of DevOps and DevSecOps, regarding also our core competences.
Yes, even I can't say it.
Anyway, the thing that we at KuppingerCole do best. If you are interested as the audience in finding more information about, we've just been talking about, we really recommend the Leadership Compass pattern for DevOps, and also the Leadership Compass around the traditional, in air quotes, PAM. And if you have interest in more information, just use our search engine at the KuppingerCole website. To the upper right corner, type in DevOps, type in PAM, or just type in Paul Fischer to get to more information of the research that you are providing. Yeah,
type in my name, and then people, I'll get lots, make me look very important.
Right.
When they look at the search logs on the web.
Exactly. Okay, thank you very much, Paul, for being my partner in crime today, and looking forward to talking to you soon about this workplace delivery stuff.
It's been a pleasure. Have a great day, evening, or whatever it is. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.